Hello everyone, today I want to talk about Phaedrus, a Platonic dialogue. Before I do so though, I want to clarify something just a little bit. The works that I review on this channel are mainly supposed to be like more obscure, more stuff that you won't run into if you're perusing your bookstore, and there's like the classics section and it's like, Iliad, Odyssey, and then like the major historians, Herodotus, Thucydides, stuff like that. More works off the beaten path a little bit. And I say that because Plato is obviously a super famous philosopher, author, etc. So he's not technically obscure in that kind of sense, but I think Phaedrus is obscure enough of a work to warrant a review on this channel because it's not a republic, and it's not a dialogue that you would find in the kind of trial and death of Socrates sort of editions that you'll find often. It's instead a very short work, kind of hidden, not hidden, but like kind of lies within like the large catalog of Plato. You probably won't find this taught a lot in schools and stuff like that. With that being said, back to the review. So, this is, again, a very short book. It's only like about like 100 pages long. It is a book about rhetoric, and it's kind of divided into two parts, almost like halves. First half is three speeches. There are three speeches that that Socrates kind of discusses with his friend Phaedrus, hence the title of the work. And it's a speech by Lysias, and then two speeches by Socrates. And then the second half is just a discussion about rhetoric as a whole. Now, the speeches themselves are about love, because this whole dialogue starts with with Socrates in the outside of Athens, just walking around, and he runs into Phaedrus. And Phaedrus is kind of looking over this speech by Lysias that he really likes. That he's a big Lysias fan. And so he's kind of like looking over the speech and like practicing his own speech making and stuff like that. And Socrates has Phaedrus compose the speech for him, and Socrates, of course, being the big contrarian that he is like, I don't think that was a good speech. I think he did this, this, and this wrong. He then conducts his speech taking Lysias's thesis about love and making his own version of it. The thesis in question is that Lysias thinks that a tutor and his younger male companion shouldn't love each other, because in Athens there's kind of like a pederasty kind of companion tutorship going on, because back in the ancient world that wasn't seen as a bad thing as long as the young man in question was an adolescent, if that makes sense. Obviously something we would find repulsive today, so if you're reading this, you kind of have to just try to imagine if it was just like I don't know, something today we would find better, I guess. Anyways, so Socrates then kind of critiques his own speech because he doesn't like Lysias's thesis itself. So then he kind of just comes up with a longer speech about love and why it's good. And of course, I could break down this speech further and talk about how he talks about madness and how the soul is divided, and the forms make an appearance in this dialogue. The forms are like one of Socrates slash Plato's like major main ideas. Um, but I'm going to leave that up to you if you want to read it. And of course, I could also break down the second half where he kind of breaks down rhetoric and kind of what the speaker should want to do. In ancient Athens, there's a huge problem, as Plato identifies it, with orators who don't care about speaking the truth so much as speaking what the people want to hear. You know, it's more about like winning than about making an actual good point. And that's all I'll say about that, because I would recommend you read this. It is, in terms of Plato's speeches, or not Plato's speeches, Plato's works, it's actually one of the more accessible ones. It's not too long. It's not like a Republic where it's like 500 pages long or however long that can get. Um, and even this is obviously going to depend on the translation you read. Even the content itself, like just reading through it, it doesn't get as dense as a lot of Plato's works can. A lot of other Plato's works, like one that comes to mind for me, is the second half of Gorgias, where he kind of picks apart Gorgias's whole career pretty much in the first half, and then the second half he kind of moves on to more abstract stuff. And for me, when I first read that, it was actually a bit of a challenge to get through because Plato has a tendency to get really like technical and like um, his usages of like analogies and stuff like that can get really, really hard to follow. This doesn't have that problem so much. Um, and I would also say about it too is that it tackles themes that aren't too specific. I mean, the type of love that he talks about, again, between an older man and a younger man, is obviously dated, obviously something that wouldn't fly today. But the way he describes the love is something that's applicable to today between, you know, obviously two consenting adults who love each other. Um, Many of the analogies he uses in here are pretty good, pretty thought provoking, pretty apt too, again, when talking about the division of the soul and how it's like a chariot, a winged chariot. It sounds a little silly initially when you maybe read a Cliff Notes version of it, but when he actually breaks it down, it makes a lot of sense. It also has some of Plato's patent mythology making, where in a lot of his works he'll come up with his own version of Greek mythology, and oftentimes it can get ridiculous. The most famous example of this is Atlantis. A lot of people don't know this, but Plato pretty much invented Atlantis to serve as like metaphor land. Not in this work, mind you, but in other works, a couple other works. Um, and this, it's the 10,000 Year Soul. Again, I won't give it away because I think you should read it. But yeah, and of course the length too is, I think, going to be a draw for a lot of people because if you're not a classicist, if you're not like into this kind of stuff, but you're curious about the subject matter, maybe you're curious about what he has to say about love and what he has to say about rhetoric, which I also think is pretty apt, pretty a pretty good take on the art of rhetoric and public speaking and stuff like that. I think this is a good book to read about that. I would, however, say that if you're gonna read it, find an edition that has a really good introduction. So like this, we'll put Hackett. This Hackett edition has like a 40-page introduction, which at times can get a little excessive, but it really breaks down the dialogue well, and it really explains each point he makes and kind of helps you through the dialogue. Because even though it isn't as complicated as, again, a Republic or anything like that, it's still Plato. It's still an intellectual like exercise, and there's still a lot of things that aren't super clear and that you really have to think about. And so, other than that, though, yeah, I would recommend you read this book. It's not like an essential must read book, but it's a very nice dialogue. It raises some very interesting questions, and I don't think you have to be like a hardcore classicist to get something out of it, or a hardcore philosophy major, or you know, you don't have to be anything like that. So yeah, I mean, if any of you have read it, I would be interested to hear your own opinions, whether you agree or disagree. And don't forget to subscribe. Subscribe. See ya.